everyone! It has been a long time since I've done a video and I figured I should do one right now. So a couple questions I've always gotten was about, hey Daisha, what was Japan like? And how was Korea like? Because yes, I've been to both. However, I must say that I've lived in Japan and only visited Korea. So therefore my opinion might be a little bit different because I have not lived in Korea, so I can't really compare the two dramatically, but I can compare them based off like what I've seen the few days I was there. So let's get this started. I find the people of Japan to be more shy, more quiet and reserved versus the people of Korea. I find them to be more like Americans, where they're kind of more talkative and outgoing. I remember the first time I stepped foot in Korea and this old man approached me asking, "Hey, are you an American?" "Oh, hi. Yes, I am, actually." "Ah, yes. I'm very interested in speaking English. Could you help me out?" "Oh, sure. I would love to help you practice your English." "Actually, I really want to talk about politics." That's kind of a complicated topic, but sure. And that's something you would never, ever see in Japan, or at least like I've never experienced living there. So Japanese people tend to be more shy and reserved versus Korea, where they tend to be more upfront. Another thing I noticed was about public display affection. I said that right? Whereas people in Japan tend to be a little bit more shy about holding hands and giving hugs and all that kind of stuff. And in Korea, I saw couples all the time hold hands and, you know, like give hugs and kisses in public. So it was kind of interesting, like despite them being so near each other, how different they were. Another big difference about Japan and Korea is their food. Japanese foods tend to be a little bit more sweeter side, and Korean food tends to be a little bit more on the spicy side. I do find Japan to be a little bit more cleaner. I do think that's because they've kind of been more industrialized quicker, or longer I should say, than Korea, which is a more recent kind of thing that's going on right now. So what I mean by that is like Korea tends to have a little bit more like older and more rural kind of things versus Japan. Although Japan does have like a lot of really cool rural things as well. Korean language is much easier to write, although I do find it harder to pronounce, whereas Japanese language is very difficult to write just because they have the kana, which consists of hiragana and katakana, and they also have kanji, which derives from Chinese characters. Korea fortunately does not have that, so it's kind of a little bit easier to learn to write. But I do think that for the English-speaking tongue, Japanese is a little bit easier to pronounce versus Korea, which is just a little bit more harder to pronounce for us. Our music tends to be a little bit more different. J-pop I find a little bit more hyper and upbeat and very cutesy-like, versus Korea music, especially like K-pop, tends to be a little bit more on the sexy side and kind of cool sounding. Japan's a bit more on the expensive side, whereas Korea's a little bit on the cheaper side. I found when I was in Japan, a lot of times when I was going out at a nice like sit-down restaurant, I would spend about 10 to 15 bucks, even more, sometimes up to $30 on a meal with my friends, versus in Korea, which I spent about $7 on a really nice meal. Although you can find cheaper options in Japan, especially Japanese fast food. I also do find that Korean people tend to be a little bit more blunt, whereas Japanese people tend to not be that way, meaning like in Korea, like if you're fat or if you have like acne or something, like they will tell you like you're fat. It's also pretty easy to go to both countries, however, whether if you're studying or if you're working. So I went to Japan as a student, and I went through Nagoya University of Foreign Studies. And there's a lot of schools in Japan that takes foreign exchange students into their country. And in Korea, there's also those options, but maybe not as many. So that's kind of nice. Japan has a little bit more options if you're a student, although Korea do have those options as well. As for like finding a job, the most common job that people tend to do is teach abroad, and you can equally find good jobs for both Korea and Japan. Although based on my research, it does seem like Japan tends to pay a little bit more, but it's a little bit more expensive versus Korea, although they pay a bit less. It's a less expensive country, so overall you kind of sort of break even, but maybe save a little bit more money going to Korea just because it's cheaper. A lot of times their programs tend to pay for your airfare and they tend to pay for your housing. Versus in Japan, that's not really that common. You might have to pay for your own housing and your own like transportation. So Korea overall might be better financially. But we're pretty similar in terms of like their spaces. They're kind of a compact, you know. They also have subways that can be pretty compact, especially during rush hours. They have tall buildings they build vertically versus horizontally in the States, just because they have so many people in one small area. So which one would I suggest to you? I honestly do think it depends, especially on the person and their personality, whether they're stably financial or not, or just their overall situation. So I find that maybe personality-wise, Korea could be a good fit because if you're very outgoing, kind of like to club or like party, you know, drinking and just kind of like being out there, then I think Korea again is the better option. Whereas Japan, where if you tend to be more quieter, more reserved, I think that is your better fit. Although there are different kinds of people in each country, so not every one person is that way. You'll of course find quiet and shy people in Korea, and you'll probably find really outgoing partiers in Japan as well. So this is by no means, you know, a specific, this doesn't count for everyone, but although this is just tends to be the generalization that I saw when I was in both countries. If you guys study Japanese, the word tomodachi means friendship. Whereas in Korea, apparently they don't have a word for friends. So I guess that sense of like friends and connecting, going out, is really important in Japan. And I'm not saying, of course, that probably doesn't exist in Korea. I guess maybe there's just no language for that meaning to occur. Another thing I should say though is that like when I was in Korea, I was in Seoul. And when I lived in Japan, I was in Nagoya. So Seoul is basically, you know, the main capital of Korea. And Nagoya is like the third or biggest fourth city in Japan. And I also tended to live in more rural areas. So I lived in Nishin, which was about 45-minute commute from my home to Nagoya. And because of the rural area, people could be kind of different, you know, versus like the city. So Tokyo could honestly be more similar to Seoul. And because I haven't lived in Tokyo, I'm not really too sure. My opinions could be a little bit skewed just because of the location I was in Japan and the location I was in Korea. And the fact that I was only in Korea for a few days versus like half a year, 2 years in Japan. So they are obviously very different, but these are just things that I noticed. I really enjoyed staying in Japan. It was honestly probably the best experience I've had in my life, and I would never give up anything for it. But at the same time, I think both countries do differ based on your personality. Another reason why you might want to choose Japan or Korea is based off your financial stability. So currently I am a college student and I'm kind of in debt with a lot of money because of my college debts. So I planned on teaching abroad, and I've been debating very heavily between Japan and Korea, which is why I've done like so much research based on the two. And overall, I think my options for Korea is a little bit better because overall I can make a little bit more money to pay back off my loans for my college debt versus in Japan where people tend to break even because they have to pay for their housing and stuff. So they kind of like don't make up as much money that they can set aside and save. And I am to go to grad school and I want to pay off these loans first. So that's why financially Korea might be better for me. If I didn't have those loans or my debt I'm in, then like maybe I would choose Japan. Again, these are only just my opinions based off my ideas and what I've researched on and what I've seen in person, but they could be different for anybody and different people. I just wanted to give kind of like a good insight or general idea because people have asked me about that. Oh my gosh, how's Korea like? Oh my gosh, how Japan is like. So that's why I really wanted to do this video and wanted to kind of keep it short and sweet and to the point. But if you do have any questions, feel free to comment below and I will answer them the best I can. Also, you can ask me questions on Twitter and I will make sure to get back to them as soon as possible and sure to make more videos in the future answering your questions. Thank you. See ya.